Genesis chapter 12, starting in verse 1, it says, Now the Lord had said unto Abram, Get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, unto a land that I will show thee. And I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curseth thee. And in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. So Abram departed, as the Lord had spoken unto him, and Lot went with him. And Abram was 75 years old when he departed out of Haran. And Abram took Sarai his wife, and Lot his brother's son, and all their substance that they had gathered, and the souls that they had gotten in Haran, and they went forth to go into the land of Canaan, and into the land of Canaan they came. And Abram passed through the land unto the place of Shechem, unto the plain of Moreh, and the Canaanite was then in the land. And the Lord appeared unto Abram, and said, Unto thy seed will I give this land, and there builded he an altar unto the Lord, who appeared unto him. And he removed from thence unto a mountain on the east of Bethel, and pitched his tent, having Bethel on the east, and Bethel on the west, and Hai on the east. And there he builded an altar unto the Lord, and called upon the name of the Lord. And Abram journeyed, going on still toward the south. We'll go ahead and stop there, and let's have a word of prayer. Lord, I want to thank you for this time we can have tonight in your word. I pray that you will bless this time, Lord. I pray that you will speak through me. Lord, you know that I want this to be not my thoughts, not my words, but a message from you. And I pray that you will help this to be exactly that. Lord, I pray that you will just use this time. I pray in your name. Amen. You can go ahead and be seated. I'm going to start off just a little differently here. We read Genesis 12, 1 through 9. You can turn over here with me if you'd like. I'm not really going to give you time, but I'm also going to read Hebrews 11, verse 8 and 9, about the same man, by faith Abraham, when he was called to go out into a place which he should after receive for an inheritance, obeyed. And he went out, not knowing whither he went. By faith he sojourned in the land of promise, as in a strange country, dwelling in tabernacles with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise. Tonight's message, I simply have titled Choices in the Journey. Abraham is known for a lot of things. I guess I'll start with that. I realize in Genesis 12 it calls him Abram. In Hebrews 11 it calls him Abraham. He's Abraham later on. I am going to use the two names interchangeably. So I decided if I say that, then when I mess up and say the wrong one, it was on purpose, so it's okay. Because I am going to. Abram is known for a lot of things. And I very seriously considered preaching choices out of his life as a whole. But I happen to know Brother Rick Tigg is also going to be preaching a portion of his life next week, and didn't want to mess him up completely on that. So I decided I'm going to stick to chapter 12 just to stay well away from where he's going to be headed next week. But Abram is known for some major choices that he had to make along the way, and not easy choices. But I think some of the choices and decisions that he had to make are things we overlook, things that maybe we don't see as a choice. I've through this series pointed out that a lot of the choices that we have are things that we don't even realize we're deciding on. And I think very often we do that with some of the choices in the Bible. Perhaps some of the choices that he made are things that we would see as maybe insignificant, but played a huge role in his life. Again, I titled the message Choices in the Journey, and I know that it lasted longer than just this chapter, and I intend to look at more of them, but we'll get there as we go. I'm going to jump right into the message. First choice that I want to see, Abram chose to go where God led. Chose to go where God led. I've preached on this some before. Can you imagine the decision that's made here? When God comes to Abram and tells him, I want you to get out of thy country. This was home. This was what he knew. I'll never forget the day that my dad told us we were going to move from Astoria, Oregon to San Dimas, California for him to go on staff at the college. I was born and raised in Astoria. It was quite literally, other than traveling, it was all I knew. I was born, well, where we lived at the time, we lived halfway between the town I was born in and Astoria. I mean, they were both only, 10, 15 minutes from where our house was. It was all that I knew, and by my way of thinking at that time, it was perfect. It's a small town. I was born in a town 15, 20 minutes away from Astoria, and again, at that point, had spent my entire life there. We lived on some property. I don't know how much property we actually had. I think it was an acre or so, but it seemed like more because we lived on some property, but our neighbor on one side had a few acres that we could roam, and our neighbor in front of us had 200 acres plus of farm that we had to roam. My best friend was my neighbor, so we quite literally spent every day with my best friend. We got to work on the farm and be paid by the farmer to do all sorts of things that I would be terrified to let my kids do at that age. It was a kid's dream. And then one night, I remember it very vividly, that one night my dad tells the family he wants to talk to us and informs us we're going to be leaving the only home my brother and I knew to move to California. Now, I know in saying that, giving that description, I did this on purpose, that it sounds worse than it was. But I want to paint the picture. Because in turn, I loved living on the campus at the college, but it gets the idea. Astoria was all I knew. It was home. And we left. That's what's happening with Abram. This is home, and God tells him, I want you to leave. This was his comfort zone. And I know this falls kind of right in line with the last idea, but follow me. We all have this, that we have those places that we feel comfortable. Maybe it's that group of friends that we feel comfortable, and I don't have to put myself out. I don't have to go out of my way. I can just be comfortable. That's what this is for Abram. This is his comfort zone. This was his family. We saw that in verse 1. God tells him, "Now the Lord said unto Abram, Get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred and from thy father's house." That's not easy. I mean, that's not going to be an easy thing. I am a big-time family person. It's a big deal to me. So I feel extremely blessed that God's has placed us here where we can serve with family, and I think it's a very biblical thing. You look biblically, family didn't move away as soon as they were adults. They stuck close. They helped each other. But bigger than that, they served God together. I feel extremely blessed that, and my family is a big deal to me, so it would be a hard thing if God suddenly led that, I want you to leave your kindred and go. It's what Abraham is being led to do. This was Abram leaving his livelihood. I understand he brought his herds with him, and as he went, his flocks increased. I understand that, but everything is different now. He's leaving what he knew and what's always worked, and not only is he leaving all of that, he's doing that not knowing where he's even going. To me, that might be the hardest part of this entire thing. Leaving is going to be difficult, no doubt. Leaving your home and leaving your comfort zone, leaving your family, that's going to be a difficult thing. But I think the fact of leaving having no idea where you're going might be the hardest part. We don't like unknowns. I've said it before plenty of times. I don't like surprises. In our 15 years of marriage, one time Lisa has tried to throw me a surprise birthday party, and when I figured out what was happening, she didn't think she was going to get me in the door. I don't like them because I don't like unknowns. I am, in a lot of ways, the type of person I like to be able to think things through. Unknowns don't allow for that. That doesn't work for me, and I'm far from the only one who feels that way. We don't like unknowns. We like to have kind of all our plans laid out so that we can follow that, and that's impossible if you don't even know where you're going. It's impossible to have a plan laid out if you have no idea where you're going. God tells him, all he gives him is a land that I'll show thee. That's not a lot of detail. I want you to go to a land that I'll show thee. He went not knowing where. He went not knowing even how long. You think about it, he didn't know when he took off day one how long of a trip it would be. He didn't know how long he would need to plan for. He didn't know how long he's going to be gone. And just imagine with me here, Abram is traveling with a lot more than just himself. You know, kind of that fly by the seat of your pants idea is really easy when it's just you. It gets a lot harder when you're responsible for other people. I remember before Lisa and I were married, taking last-minute trips was easy. When I was single, I could jump in my truck, go wherever, and it really took no planning. I could just make it up as I went. When Lisa and I got married, a second person really doesn't make it any more challenging. A little, but not a lot. So quite often we would just decide, hey, we're both off work. We want to get away. Let's go to Oregon for a few days. It's not that difficult. And then we had kids, and the easy went away. Suddenly it took planning. I will never forget our first trip that we took with Josh. He was 1 week old, and it was our first anniversary, all in one. Lisa had just got out of the hospital, and we decided, well, we're gonna get away for our 1 year anniversary with our 1 week old baby. What could possibly go wrong? So we went to Oregon with. I was young and dumb. We went to Oregon, our first anniversary. The plan was to go stay at a friend's house for our first anniversary with our 1 week old baby. My wife is so good to me. And just getting out the door was comical. I had a single cab pickup and a wife and baby. Do you realize how much stuff babies require? I mean, I'm not even joking, and I'm trying to kind of paint this picture a little bit, I guess, but we hardly had room to move in the truck. There was so much stuff crammed in there. This tiny little baby, and the entire cab was stuffed with all the things needed, and we finally get it all in, and we get to Oregon. The people that we were staying with didn't have kids, so we're staying with them. They just decided, hey, let's go to dinner, and they would load up and leave. Loading up a kid to leave just doesn't happen that fast, especially when you're brand new parents and don't know what you're doing. And I don't think this is an exaggeration that they went to dinner, and my wife and I and Josh met them there like 30 minutes later after we had finally loaded him and all the stuff we needed for him to get there. All of a sudden, an impromptu trip stopped being fun and just started becoming work. And the reason I say that, traveling when you're responsible for a group of people requires some major planning. And Abram's not going by himself. He's taking his family, he's taking his flocks, he's taking his herdsmen, and has no idea of the details. I mean, you think about that. He doesn't know how much food to bring. He's responsible for all of these people. He's responsible for his flocks. He doesn't know how much food to bring. He doesn't know where they're going to stay. He doesn't know if they'll be able to find a safe place to camp for the night, because he knows nothing other than go south. Other than go, and I'm going to tell you when to stop. He knows nothing, and Abram went. Here's what he did. He chose to trust God. He chose to trust God. He recognized that he didn't need the details, that he didn't need to know the where and the when. He just needed to know God was leading and trust him. As I was studying for this, God brought this to me, that right there is what stops a lot of people from doing the will of God. That they want to know the details rather than just trusting God. There's a lot of people that would say, God, I will trust you and follow when you tell me where. But that's no longer trusting God. That's living by sight. When we're stuck on, I want to trust God and I want to follow Him, I want to obey, I just need to know where He's going to take me first. And to be honest, there are a lot of people that will never cross that hurdle. That they want to follow God and they want to trust Him, but they can't get past what they have to give up, and they can't get past not knowing. But very often we see in the Bible when God leads that He doesn't give all the details. He just wants you to trust Him. I'm going to put it this way. We see in Hebrews chapter 11, it talks about by faith Abraham. By faith Abraham was a choice. Abraham didn't have to go. God told him that if he did, he would be blessed and would be a great nation, but he could have chosen to stay right where he was, living at home in his comfort zone, but he chose to trust God and go where God led. Abram chose, number 2, to serve God wherever God had him. Look at verses 6 through 8 with me again. Verse 6 through 8, and Abram passed through the land unto the place of Sichem, unto the plain of Moreh, and the Canaanite was then in the land. And the Lord appeared unto Abram and said, unto thy seed will I give this land. And there builded he an altar unto the Lord, who appeared unto him. And he removed from thence unto a mountain on the east side of Bethel, and pitched his tent, having Bethel on the west, and Hai on the east. And there he builded an altar unto the Lord, and called upon the name of the Lord. Right here, in the start, 2 different times God moves him to first the plain and then the mountain. And both places, what's he do? He builds an altar. First in the plain of Moreh, then the mountain next to Bethel, and he builds an altar. What does that mean? Him building an altar has some significance. It shows a few things. It shows that Abraham recognized God's presence. He recognized that wherever God has me at this moment, God is here. Whether that was in a good place or not. The plain of Moreh, it specifies that the Canaanite was in the land. That's not a positive thing. It's not saying that as if it's a good thing. They're enemies. They're enemies. Here's Abraham, Abram, separated from his family and away from his home, and if you'll give me a little liberty, surrounded by his enemies. Or at least people who are going to be if he's going to take that land, and yet Abram recognized God's here. He's here with me. And then he goes to that mountaintop and sees God's here too. It reminds me of the song. I was talking to Brother Pickens and Brother Edward about it earlier. It reminds me of the song, "The God on the mountain is still God in the valley." What Abraham is recognizing by building these altars is that everywhere I am, God's here with me. That everywhere I am, God's here with me. That's important for us to figure out, because it's easy for us when we are in our comfort zone to see that God's there. And it's even pretty easy when we're on the mountaintop to see that God's there. But it's a lot harder to see when we're in that valley surrounded by the enemy. It's a lot harder to see that God's there with me when you're having those days that it feels like that nothing is going your way and everything is against you. Yeah, God is there too. And I'm sure, as I talk about this, I am sure that we can all think of times where that was the case, that it was a rough time, that things were not going well, and you felt alone, but God was there. The altar shows he recognized God's here. The altar also shows that he recognized that God was worthy of worship, despite being so far away from everything that he knew. Here's the reality of it. God is so good to us, and we so often miss it. Because we have this idea of how we define God being good to me. We have an idea of what that should mean, or what we think that should mean. That God being good to me should, in our minds, mean that we never have problems. And God being good, we often think, well, that means I'm going to have plenty of money. And God being good to me, that means I'm going to have no trouble with my coworkers, and my family is never going to have any problems. And we get those sorts of ideas in our mind, and we build it up as that. So then when life doesn't go that way, we think that He isn't being good. We think, well, why isn't God blessing me? Why isn't He being good to me? We're seeing it wrong. Abram is in the valley with Canaanites all around him, and yet stops to worship God. Because he saw even in that, God was good. The altar shows that Abram recognized God deserved his thanks. Remember, a couple of things. When he built this altar, Abram and his family still have no idea where they're going. They still have no idea how long it will take. They still have no idea where they're going to end up at the end of the day tomorrow, where God's going to have them stop. They're still in the plain, surrounded with the enemies. They're still sojourning, but they're thankful to God. They're thankful for a promise that He hasn't even delivered yet. Notice when he's in the plain of Moreh, God tells him that He's going to give him this land. They're thankful for what God's going to do. This isn't a matter of, well, God's already blessed and God's already done this for me, so I'm going to stop and thank Him for it. No, it's a matter of stopping and thanking God before He even does it. I really think it's a different kind of thankfulness than you and I often have. We like to be thankful for the end result. We like to be thankful for the end result. It makes sense to us when God finally leads them and tells them, hey, this is where you're going to be. We can understand being thankful for that, and we can understand being thankful to know where God wants us and when the sojourning is done, and we can understand when you get to your final destination, being thankful for the safety in travels. But we miss the thankfulness for the journey. This wasn't going to be easy. But he was thankful in the middle of the trial, in the middle of the journey, the difficulty. I can't tell you how many times I've had this conversation with people who maybe they had a rough childhood or who have gone through some terrible things, and they are thankful for where they are now and what God brought them through, but are angry about what happened to them. They're maybe bitter at the person who hurt them or whatever it might be, and follow me here for a second. I try to encourage that you have to learn to be thankful for the journey. There are parts of that journey that may be hard, and for some a lot harder than others. I get that. I always have a hard time talking about this because I recognize I had an easy childhood with great parents, so I understand people have gone through a whole lot harder than me. But it's those hard things that brought you to who you are right now. We have to learn to be thankful for the valleys that God brought us through. But that's a choice. That's a choice. Hey, in the plain, when Abram is surrounded by Canaanites, and God's saying, I'm going to give you this land, he could have instead complained and said, God, that means I'm going to have to fight all these people. Do you know how much work this is going to be? Do you know how hard it's going to be? They're not just going to give up their homes willingly. This is going to be a struggle. This is going to be a valley. This is going to be a hardship we're going to have to go through. But instead, he builds an altar where he worships and thanks God. It's a choice. Abram had to choose to see God's presence everywhere because that doesn't come natural. And Abram had to choose to see that God was good and deserved worship everywhere. Abram had to choose to be thankful even in the valley that God was bringing him through. And the reality is you have a choice. You can choose to sulk and to whine and to cry because it isn't fair that you had to face this, the things that someone else didn't. Or we could choose to see God and recognize His goodness and be thankful. Abram chose to go where God led. Abram chose to serve wherever God had him. Then the last thing I want us to look at tonight, Abram chose to doubt the protection of God. Look at verse 10 through 20 with me. I know we didn't read this earlier. Verse 10 through 20, there was a famine in the land, and Abram went down into Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was grievous in the land. And it came to pass, when he had come near to enter into Egypt, that he said unto Sarah his wife, Behold now, I know that thou art a fair woman to look upon. Therefore it shall come to pass, when the Egyptians shall see thee, that they shall say, This is his wife, and they will kill me, but they will save thee alive. Say, I pray thee, thou art my sister, that it may be well with me for thy sake, and my soul shall live because of thee. And it came to pass that when Abram was come into Egypt, the Egyptians beheld the woman, that she was very fair. The princes also of Pharaoh saw her, and commanded her before Pharaoh. And the woman was taken unto Pharaoh's house, and he entreated Abraham well for her sake. And he had sheep and oxen and asses, and men servants and maidservants, and she-asses and camels. And the Lord plagued Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. And Pharaoh called Abram and said, What is this thou hast done unto me? Why didst thou not tell me that she was thy wife? Why saidst thou, She is my sister, so I might have taken her to me to wife? Now therefore, behold thy wife, take her and go thy way. And Pharaoh commanded his men concerning him, and they sent him away, and his wife, and all that he had. What a strange 10 verses. I mean, here Abram and Sarah, in their late 70s, and in their journey, go through Egypt, and Abram, being the faithful man of God that he is, and the wonderful husband that he is, looks at his wife and says, You're too pretty. And if I go into Egypt with a wife that pretty, I'm going to die. They're going to kill me to get you. So just tell everyone you're my sister. I can only imagine her response. I mean, husbands in here, think for a second. If you tried to tell this to your wife, you're super pretty, honey. You have that, that's good, but so pretty that I'm afraid people are going to kill me for you. So let's just lie to everyone, and we'll pretend you're my sister so they can just take you and not kill me. Wives, how would you react to that? I'm pretty sure in most households, after saying that, the Egyptians would be the least of your worries. I mean, just being honest here, you say that in most households, and the Egyptians killing you probably isn't going to happen. They wouldn't have a chance because your wife would have already. But this is what happens, and apparently he was right, because they walk into Egypt, and that's exactly what happens. They want to take her as their own. Abram, who started out so well and who had followed God not knowing where he went, Abram who trusted God enough to leave his home and his family and everything he knew, suddenly lacked faith. He chose to doubt God, though God had led him there. That's why it always catches me off guard. He had trusted God to take him this far. He had trusted God enough to leave his home. He had trusted God enough to leave his family and enough for all of that, and yet doubted him here. Did he really think God made him leave all that to lead him through Egypt where he would die because his wife was too pretty? I mean, he chose to doubt. He chose to doubt God's protection, even though God had made promises to bring him through. The start of this, God had promised to bless him and had promised to make him a nation. And even though he had gone, God had promised him that, even though he had already gone through the valley and presented with this danger, he immediately doubted that God could protect him. Rather than choosing to trust, he chose to doubt. Makes me think of Proverbs 3:5. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, lean not unto thine own understanding. the opposite of what Abram did. He saw this problem and decided to lean on his own understanding rather than on God. All of a sudden, in his eyes, this problem became bigger than his God. And I just want to, real quickly, we're going to get to the conclusion real fast, but before I do, point this out. Despite Abram doubting God and lying to the Egyptians so that they did try to take his wife, who he called his sister, and not kill him, God still saw him through it. Even though he looked at this problem and said, that is bigger than my God, God proved he was still bigger than the problem. That he proved, I can still bring you through this. All right, conclusion this evening. What can we learn tonight? Starting off with Abram, and like I said, I think this is probably going to be over the next handful of weeks that I'm preaching in this series. I know Brother Rick Tig's going to be preaching a part of Abram's life as well. So we're going to be looking at his life for a few weeks, but starting off with him, he chose to go where God led him. He chose to serve where God had him, but then he chose to doubt when trouble came around. So let's learn from both the good choices and the bad. Let's learn to choose to go where God sends you, whether it makes sense or not, whether it takes you out of your comfort zone or not, well, I say that, you know what, I think anytime God leads, it takes us out of our comfort zone. I think that's kind of part of it. We need that. But whether you know the details of where God's taking you or not, get the mindset, wherever he leads, I'll go. Think of that congregation. We often will sing it as an invitation. But I think we rarely think of the words in those type of songs. Get that mindset that wherever he leads, I'll go. Choose to go where he sends you. Choose to serve wherever he has you. To recognize he is present, he is good, and we need to be thankful no matter where we are or what we're facing. And then choose to trust even when the trials come. Recognizing that it doesn't matter how big my problems look, he's bigger. And no matter how hard they may seem, he's bigger than them. He can handle them. And even when I don't trust him how I should, he can bring me through. Choose to go where he sends you. Choose to serve wherever he has you, and choose to trust even when trials come. Let's pray. Lord, I want to thank you for this time that we've had in your word. Lord, I thank you for the truths that we can see in this, seeing this example of Abram, Lord, and the fact that he had the faith, the confidence in you to leave everything he knew, with no details, just trusting you. But seeing that he, everywhere he went, whether it was in the plain or whether it was on the mountain, built an altar, recognizing your presence, that you were there and were good, and that he had every reason to be thankful. But then a problem came, and he forgot those things and got focused on his problem. All of a sudden saw that as bigger than you. Lord, help us to learn to choose to trust you through our trials. I pray all this in your name. Amen.
All right, let me ask you to stand tonight. Your heads bowed and your eyes closed.